So, any other thoughts that come to mind, Carolyn, when you think of communication challenges? Maybe because you deal with so many more forms of neurodivergence than I do.
Yeah.
You've had guests on your program with so many different struggles that I
Mhm.
would even begin. I don't know where you find all your peeps. Your show is so fascinating. I
Okay, thank
absolutely
you.
love it. But what other ways do you see communication affecting other forms of neurodiversity?
Gosh. I mean, just kind of running through my head. I mean, again, it is such a broad topic.
Yeah.
And I've talked recently with people who have had or who have schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder who, obviously have, I wouldn't phrase them as like communication issues, but literally if they may have periods of psychosis where they have like delusions and hallucinations. And I spoke recently with someone who had a couple times where she was hospitalized for her psychosis and went through a whole series of being misdiagnosed. But the thing that came back from her that I think can be very common. I've heard it in other guests with other forms of neurodivergences. When I was full on in psychosis, people just talked about me in front of me. Like I would be in the room and they would talk about me like I wasn't there, like I
Yeah.
didn't understand them. And I'm like, I
Yeah.
immediately think of like all my non-speaking autistic guests who experience the same thing. And my guest with schizoaffective disorder was saying like, just because someone's in psychosis, one, it doesn't mean you're always in it. You may sort of, your reality shifts. It depends on the person, but they're still
Mhm.
capable of love and they still, understand what's going on. And just the whole, excuse me, congested, the whole challenge of, hold on a second.
Yeah, no worries.
I was getting over a cold, so sometimes it catches me. But the whole concept of just they may not be able to communicate in the clearest ways if they are in psychosis, but that
Mhm.
doesn't mean that you should basically dehumanize them by just assuming that they're like, oh, whatever. Like, this person
Yeah.
doesn't understand, or they're not really all there. But generally they're very aware of what you're saying. So that's one thing that I was interesting to see that as a common experience across different types of neurodivergence.
Yeah. I even encounter that with my mother and her dementia.
Yeah.
Um, it is so easy to talk about her without her presence in the conversation, even though
Yeah.
she's right there.
Hmm?
But it's why so many of us in the neurodivergent space say nothing about us without us. That's very common for in the FASD space to be invited to these meetings where the researchers will, trot out the people with living experience and then basically say, you're dismissed, let the grown-ups talk.
Wow.
And so there's a group, they call themselves the Adult Leadership Collaboration or ALC, the FASD change makers, and that's their mission to force a more participatory engagement in the research community. I say force, but with velvet on the hammer. We will be part of this. You will learn to truly value our input because nobody can begin to understand without hearing from those living with whatever the condition is.
Yeah. And I think, you do say forced, but in a way, I think society tends to tell stories about people with disabilities or people who are neurodivergent without sort of as like spectators, like looking in and describing people. But we rarely seek out those, we rarely ask the person, like, what are you feeling? Like another thing that kind of irks me is that always around like prom time, there's always like those viral stories of like, oh, my daughter or my son asked their classmate with Down syndrome or their autistic classmate to go to prom. And oh my God, what a great person and what a nice thing they're doing for this kid. And it's like,
It's charity.
it's
Yay!
charity. But even, what could end, I'm sure their kid is very nice. I'm sure they're lovely.
Mhm.
I'm not like disparaging what they did, but at the same time, all we have to do is hear from, the kid who's
Yeah.
being invited. Like, how do they feel? Are they excited?